is like 15 years ago. It might have even been 16 years ago. There was this huge protest over there being a mosque near the 9/11 ground zero in New York City. And that was like New Yorkers. That wasn't just, the humble heartlanders who don't live in New York who were upset about it. There was an intense protest within New York over a mosque being that close.
Yeah.
And this is around 2010. This is the early Obama years where there was that protest. So you still saw that in New York in the early 2010s.
First, let's lead off with who did Mamdani think? Did he thank Americans for his victory, his meteoric rise in New York City? Here's who he had to thank. Let's take a look from Zoron.
I speak of Yemeni bodega owners and Mexican abuelas, Senegalese taxi drivers and Uzbek nurses, Trinidadian line cooks and Ethiopian aunties. Yes, aunties.
I think you could potentially just keep repeating different groups of people and get so specific that it becomes like really racist, That could be a potential action. But let's see, we're bringing Scott Greer in. Hey, Scott, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Dude, what's up, Patriot?
What is up?
Dude, so before we get started, maybe you can give the people watching a quick intro who you are, what you do.
So my name is Scott Greer. I am a podcaster, an author, and writer, and most of my work can be found in my Substack on highly-respected.com or highly-respected.com. You can find my work on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/highly-respected, if I remember correctly. Anyway, just type in highly respected. It should come up on the YouTube search bar.
Let's go. Well, I'm glad I brought you in. We got you. We had to wrangle you because I had read your piece where you were sort of breaking down Zoran's victory, what this means for the left. I know recently you had said that you were kind of, as the left sort of has to look inward and determine, okay, how do we sort of rebrand for the next chapter, that they would kind of take on a bit of chauvinism. Maybe that would be kind of the technique. While Zoran, yeah, like you said, okay, maybe he incorporated a little bit of that. He's very much more Reddit. He's very much more theater kid. And in that article, you also pointed out that it's not entirely accurate to call him a third worldist. Now, that's a line that me and a few others in the space have been taking, but maybe you can define kind of that chauvinism aspect and then maybe why the third worldist isn't the most accurate sort of title for him or adjective for him.
Yeah, a few years ago, I read an article saying that the left may embrace what we could call American Chavism, and that's named after Hugo Chavez, the left-wing dictator of Venezuela who was succeeded by Maduro, which now Trump is not very happy with Maduro. And they had a very left-wing socialist regime that was very hostile towards the West, very hostile towards capitalism, obviously, and had a certain bravura and a very machismo aspect to it. Now, this isn't really the case with Zoran. Like Maduro and Chavez are kind of like swaggering alpha males. Yeah. They're like, we're going to take away your stuff. Meanwhile, I would never use the term swaggering for Zoran, maybe prancing around or something, but it's definitely not swaggering. And I offer this idea is that what we would see in American Chavism is a combination of anti-white sentiment with economic socialism, as that these people would be denouncing the white man and saying we need to take all their stuff. We need this massive wealth redistribution from whites to the other people in order to have the socialist utopia or whatever. And I predicted this would happen. Now, you sort of have that with Zoran. Zoran and his campaign ran woke, or it had a woke agenda, even though if he didn't highlight it as much. In fact, if you compare him to, say, the 2020 Democratic presidential primary, he was almost anti-woke compared to them. But his agenda was still very woke because he's talking about taxing whites at a higher rate than other people. He's talking about ending gifted programs because they don't have a sufficient level of racial diversity. And even a lot of the other things he's talking about has that similar woke focus. So he still had that anti-white sentiment, even if he's not driving at that. And we even saw that in his victory speech where he highlighted like every single immigrant group that backed him and said, this is your country too. He didn't mention white New Yorkers in that coalition, curiously enough, even though, of course, a lot of these wealthy are not very much wealthy, but middle-class young people who voted for him, which I use the term yuckies, young urban creative. It's better to call them that than yuppies. different demographic, different type of people. You know, they were not being included. He didn't thank all the
Patrick Bateman
great
wasn't doing resin art, like, you know.
yeah. It's not like thanking all the great HR professionals who helped him win.
Right.
You know, it's this type of demographic. So that's still there, and it's obviously very economically socialist. So that you do see those elements, but it's not quite as militant as I may have imagined with American Chavism a few years ago. I was thinking more type Black Panthers or
Right.
the Latin American militants we always see south of the border. Now, on the third worldist element, I think it depends on how you define it. And the article I was responding to with, I'm probably going to mispronounce her name, but Zeneb Rabua. My apologies.
Starts sort of floating around here, you know.
If I mispronounce the name, but she argued that third worldism is inherently about destroying Western hegemony, and she ties it firmly with anti-Zionism, and that's a core part of it. And she argues that, you know, Jews and Israelis are really the hostility. That's what animates it at heart, which, you know, there's sort of some elements of that, but Zoran wants to doesn't really want to overturn Western hegemony. He wants to take it over for his side and then make it more cringe. Third worldists of the past wanted to destroy America and Europe, and then delegate power elsewhere. That's why they worship China, Mao, Vietnam, Cuba. They were admiring all these states. The new woke people aren't as enthralled to these third world regimes as they once were. And they still want power to reside within the American empire. They just want it to be much woker and much more cringe. It's why they still strongly back Ukraine against Russia. It's why they even a lot of times they'll come out and still deeply care about supporting Taiwan against China and many other things. They don't have the similar geopolitical focus as the third worldists of old, or how people imagine third worldism. I think it's fine to use as an epithet against Zoran. There are third worldist aspects of him, such as him eating rice with his hand. Dude. But you know, he is at the end of the day still woke, and woke. You know, there's similarities between woke and third worldism, but woke still wants to uphold Western hegemony. It just wants to make it much worse and much more cringe, but it still imagines the American-led global order is still intact.
Like the pride flags in Tehran.
Yeah. We want the State Department's flying pride flags, not the embassies wiped out.
Yeah, well, Zoran seems like kind of an interesting synthesis, because I agree with you. Like, okay, he's clearly not, you know, your classical, you know, well-read third worldist who's like, oh, we need to get revenge on these colonists and whatever. I mean, he flipped off the Columbus statue. That's really the extent of it. To me, he kind of represents the synthesis between woke and kind of this third world mindset, because to me, it looks a little bit more like potentially South Africa, where it's like, okay, yes, maybe the South Africans, they were cozy with the Cubans or the Soviets, that sort of thing. But when they took over power, they kept the free market to a large degree. They just passed anti-white policy. So maybe third worldist isn't the best description, but I guess what I'm getting at is it drives me crazy when they're describing what could be the outcome of a Zoran New York City, they start saying like Sharia law and like actual socialism. And I'm just like, that's not really what I'm worried about. I'm just worried about the fact that he openly admits that he wants to tax white neighborhoods at a higher rate. Like, he's partying at gay clubs at like 2 a.m. That's not really like jihadist behavior.
Yeah, the jihadist line is so funny, and there's people falling for it. To this morning, one of these content farmers, I won't name him, I guess they might be watching the show, but he took this parody video. It's some woman, she might even be Muslim, but she's clearly secular. She's not wearing the hijab or anything, and she's like, all right, we're already going to start the Islamification in New York. We're lining up everyone at the mosque, and it's clearly like it's a bad satire, and it's parodying all these views. And then this guy took it as like, they're no longer hiding it anymore. The mask is dropping. They're going to try to convert everyone to Islam in New York City, which is like, if you look at his whole campaign, this is like the, you know, lamest thing ever, the complete opposite of like a devout Muslim. I mean, he did go and try to appeal to devout Muslims, but it's just part of this rainbow coalition he's formed. And but they're not going to be, implementing Sharia law. I think that would have some negative effects on the gay clubs he was
Yeah.
campaigning at. And a lot of his audience would not be supportive of that. But I mean, it's still, it's one of those things that in middle America, there's still a lot of
Sure.
understandable anti-Islamic sentiment. And that's an easy way to, and I'm not using this pejorative because I think there is a need to present Zoran as a threat and to fearmonger about him. Now, I
Right.
think that's good that we want to portray him as a threat, but it comes across as very stupid. And if you look at some of the campaigning, this probably did help Mamdani at the end of the day. With like Andy Oakles, a Tennessee congressman, showing off as like, have you forgotten New York? And it's about like 9/11, and it's like we're gonna have this again. Zoran's gonna fly the plane straight into the Empire State Building this
Right.
time. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think he's gonna be a suicide bomber, but it's just a way to present the threat, and I guess that's more threatening than rent control that destroys the city.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it'd be like, it's the same, by the same logic, you'd be like worried about Joe Biden establishing like a Catholic integralist,
Oh
government
yeah,
like day one.
absolutely.
Like, it's just like, that's not really, once you kind of adopt leftism, you leave a lot of the devout religiousness at the door. But yeah, I kind of get it though. Because I mean, I think one line that did seem to resonate, at least with a lot of people, is maybe not that Zoran would sort of perpetrate another 9/11 himself, but that it is shocking that a city that literally in my lifetime, I'm 24, in my lifetime witnessed, Islamic terror attack knocking down, these two massive skyscrapers, 20 something odd years later, they can elect a Muslim. I think that's actually a very salient point, is saying like, okay, maybe not what changed liberals' minds. It's like, look how fast it took to replace New Yorkers. Because all those New Yorkers that remembered that, they voted for Cuomo. They showed the exit polling. Native New Yorkers voted for Cuomo. It was, and a lot of them voted for Sliwa as well. It was non-native New Yorkers, and that includes transplants, but immigrants primarily, voted for Zoran Mamdani. So it's like, it's not that New Yorkers forgot about 9/11. It's just that the ones that do remember it live in Florida now or North Carolina. They got pushed out and replaced. So
That's right. And it's just a changing attitude towards Islam in the country. It was like 15 years ago, it might have even been 16 years ago, there was this huge protest over there being a mosque near the 9/11 ground zero in New York City. And that was like New Yorkers. That wasn't just, the humble heartlanders who don't live in New York who were upset about it. There was an intense protest within New York over a mosque being that close.
yeah,
And this is around 2010. This is the early Obama years where there was that protest. So you still saw that in New York in the early 2010s,
yeah,
but it's gone away. And I think you would have seen even there a lot of concern over electing a Muslim, in the late 2010s when ISIS was still fresh in people's minds.
yeah.
But right now, people have forgotten radical Islam. We haven't really had a major Islamic terror attack in the United States in a while. Even the Palestinian issue, it feels separated from radical
Yeah,
Islam, even if
yeah.
Hamas is, a very Islamist organization, clearly.
Yeah.
But there it's separated from that issue. So we don't feel the threat of radical Islam, especially when we're presented these people like Ilhan Omar. Even though she wears a hijab, she divorced her husband and married a Jewish man for her second husband, and she broke up that marriage, if I'm not mistaken. So that's not like very much Sharia behavior. I don't think
Right.
that'd be allowed under Sharia law. Then you have Mamdani, who's this theater kid, and on and on. It's now that all these Muslims come here and they become assimilated libtards rather than jihadists, which that's not, maybe that's a slight improvement.
Just barely, yeah. It's marginal.
I mean, it gives them an ability to be more powerful. I mean, if Omar was a full-on Islamist, she wouldn't have been elected to office.
Right.
And that's the same with Mamdani. So it actually is worse because now they're able to join into this rainbow coalition and push against traditional America and push for these radical policies that run against America's interests. But it's harder to create a threat around the theater kid versus,
Right.
Osama bin Laden. And that's really what creates fear. And even on the world stage, we don't really remember ISIS that much. ISIS seems pretty defeated. Al-Qaeda is not really doing much of anything. I mean, Europe still struggles a lot with radical Islam. Like this week, they've broken up like multiple potential terror attacks on Christmas markets and other things. Like there's even in Germany that there's some Christmas markets they can't run because they can't afford the security costs. So they still have a major Islamic terror problem in Europe, but Americans aren't as aware of that, and it doesn't seem to affect us. So we don't have as much of an intense hostility towards Islam that we would have had even in the first Trump term. You got to remember the Muslim ban that Trump opposed in the primary helped him win the primary.
Yeah.
Now it's, he was still running on that, but people didn't really even pay attention because it's just not as much of a salient issue as it once was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can even go back like 2008, the anti-Islam fervor was at such a high moment. Like there was like a town hall with John McCain, and just because Barack Obama's name is like vaguely Islamic, that lady got up and she was like, honestly, I think he's a Muslim. And John McCain,
I think she even said he's an Arab, which he's even better.
Yeah. And John McCain like cucked. He's like, we're not going to say that. I'm like, we should have listened to her. She knows ball a little bit, So yeah.
And the funny thing about that McKay clip, I think she like calls him an Arab. I mean, she means Muslim, but she calls him an Arab. But he's like, no man, he's a good man, which is implying if he was an Arab, he would not be a good man. so it's a funny moment all around that whole clip. We need some real patriots like that woman to come up and talk about Barack Hussein Obama. But if that was the case with Obama, like everyone thought, I mean, we had just gone to war against a guy named Saddam Hussein, and now we've got a guy with that as his middle name. So that's like very weird to people.
I remember Rush Limbaugh used to like always say his name is Barack Hussein Obama.
Yeah, and it's to remind people like it's a foreign name. It's a foreign guy, and he sounds threatening with that name. But then clearly Obama was far away from a Muslim. I mean, he pretended to be a Christian. He's likely agnostic, but I mean, it's hard to even fearmonger about Obama being like a secret, Islamist. Is like, I don't think, it's more that he's had other secrets in his life that a Sharia court wouldn't like. But, that's the same. That's the thing with Obama. But, it was a different time period. I mean, that could return. I think there's a lot of people who want to, we still have problems with, Islamification in like Michigan. I mean, if you look at Dearborn, there was that crazy town council meeting where they named a street. I think they named a street or a building after a guy who had supported radical Islamic groups. And there was just one lone white guy in Dearborn came up to protest it. And the mayor was basically like, you need to be pushed out of the city. I hate you. Yeah. You're a hater. You're the worst guy ever. We're glad we're replacing you. Yeah. And it's like,
he's like, can we not call the road Kill All Infidels Road? Can we not do that? And they're like, get out of here. Dude.
Yeah. But I mean, it's funny with like conservatives, like a year ago, Trump was campaigning towards the Muslims and highlighting, the not only just Biden's Israel policy, but also wokeness in schools. And you saw this in like Dearborn and other places where all these people in full Muslim gear are out there protesting trans stuff in their kids' school. And then conservatives are like, based Muslims, and you're like, well, I don't know about that. But then conservatives had this sympathy for them when they're opposing wokeness in schools, and that's also an issue that doesn't seem to be as fresh in people's minds right now. So some people will remember that there's bad Muslims, and Mom Donnie reminds some, at least conservatives, about that.
Well, there was this theorizing on the right in conservative circles. It kind of stopped a few years ago, but they would always see moments like that where, Muslims would be protesting some sort of woke book or something, and they would be like, see, the intersectional coalition is breaking down. But Zoran seemed to just completely shatter that, because like his coalition was literally like everyone that's basically just not like a normal American patriot. And he stitched it together pretty seamlessly. And so maybe you can outline why that's probably not entirely accurate to say like the intersectional coalition is like on the verge of collapse.
Well, it's not really. It's definitely not on the verge of the collapse. I mean, a lot of minorities did vote for Trump for various reasons. I mean, a lot of these Muslims voted for him because they're sick of like libs posting crazy stuff in schools, or they were upset about Biden's Israel policy, and it was a way to protest Biden by voting for Trump. There was that, and then a bunch of it, and nearly 46% of Hispanics voted for Trump, and then I think it was around 40% of Asians. But that's not set in stone that they're all going to stay there. And right now with Mamdani, a lot of those immigrants shifted. And in 2020, and not the 2025 elections, it just happened on Tuesday, the immigrants, they were noticing that the immigrants are shifting back to the Democrats.
Yeah.
Without Trump at the helm, it's not guaranteed that these immigrants are going to stay there. And a lot of these immigrants obviously aren't very happy with Trump's deportation policy. So they're shifting back. And Mamdani's coalition was a combination of these, I don't know if we'll just say downwardly mobile or, economically threatened middle-class young white people or young people, college educated. A lot of them are Asian and other things.
People that own tote bags. I think that's fair.
College educated yuckies.
Yeah.
Along with immigrants. That was his core base. Working class whites and blacks did not vote for him. Now, it's not that the blacks are going Republican, it's that blacks generally stick with the establishment candidate. That's usually the case. I mean, they did that in the 2020 primaries where hardly any of them voted for Bernie. They all went for Biden. They generally don't go with the insurgent candidate. They generally stick with the establishment Democrat. That's why they stuck with Cuomo and probably would have voted for Eric Adams if he stayed in. And then it was like the working class whites and probably the more affluent middle class whites, the yuppies who really fear getting their taxes going up and the crazy stuff that's going to happen to the city. But the more the middle class people who feel more economically precarious and the young college educated people without kids and stuff, they were more likely to vote for Mamdani. So it was that combination of yuckies and immigrants that proved the winning formula for Mamdani. And I think that's what we're really going to see for a lot of these far left candidates is a combination of college educated Americans who feel that they're not having the same economic prospects as their parents. And then they're won over to a left-wing populist message along with immigrants who, they turned against Democrats when they felt that they were pushing a bunch of crazy stuff in their kids' schools and they were letting criminals run rampant. Now they may shift back to the left if they are told that, Mamdani's campaign is like, oh, I don't want to defund police anymore. And maybe they were won over to that. And he didn't really highlight, how they're going to push like gender indoctrination in schools. He just simply was like, we're ending gifted programs so your kids can go to better schools or whatever.
Yeah.
And end the inequality in schools. So it's a different message. And I think that can very well win back those two demographics. Because, Trump did pretty well among young people, particularly young men, but Mamdani won 68% of young men.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is what Bannon was talking about. He was talking to Politico about this. He was saying, look, he keeps reemphasizing this, and it's true, and a lot of Republicans don't quite understand this yet, is like populism is a viable tool to turn out low propensity voters, whether you like it or not. And Zoran was tapping into that. He tapped into low propensity voters, and that's just the secret sauce. So my question is, what aspects of this Zoran thing are viable, maybe not nationwide, but in other cities? How much of it do you think is more exclusive to New York City? As in, why should people be concerned about a Zoran? Because a lot of people are just saying, oh, it's New York, let them, screw themselves over. What specifically about Zoran is it that makes him a little bit of a evolution and I guess wokeism to be
it can apply nationwide. New York is not that far left of a city compared to others. This is not Seattle or Portland, and they generally tend to go with I don't want to use the term centrist, but a moderate seeming Democrat. Bill de Blasio is an exception, but they went with Bloomberg multiple terms, Giuliani, and then they had Eric Adams was presented as a moderate candidate. So they generally go for the moderate. This isn't, like basing your assumptions on, or even some place like Minneapolis where they're generally far left. Yeah. This is like a major American city that has a lot of normal people. If they went with this crazy guy, that's a concerning factor. And I think the economic populism of a left-wing variety is something that Democrats can sell nationwide.
Yeah. Looks like I don't know. I think my camera went
out.
Yeah,
your camera went black, so I was like about to talk more, but I was worried that we lost
I think it's a Zoran attack. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, Mamdani has attacked. This is Sharia law coming down on us.
This is what every woman in New York City is going to see after mandated burqas are rolled out.
Yeah, after starting Monday.
Yeah, literally. All right. Well, it's okay. We're running down the clock anyway. So I don't know. Maybe you want to give closing thoughts and where people can find you if they want more.
Yeah, I think for closing thoughts, to go on that point with Mamdani is not a flash in the pan. This can be a formula for other candidates to run on, and somebody is going to run on this in 2028, whether it's AOC or Ro Khanna or somebody else we don't know, and they're going to be a competitive candidate. I don't know if that person will win, but they have the potential to win, as Mamdani shows. If he can win in New York City on this platform, somebody like that can win a Democratic primary. Now, can they win a general election? That's another matter. So it's a major concern, and you can't just dismiss it as New York City. New York City is our biggest city. It's the beating heart of our economy and our financial sector. And if it goes to Mamdaniism, that impacts the rest of the country.
Yeah.
Just dismissing it as like, oh, it's New York City. No, that's not the case. And this can apply nationwide. So that's my closing thoughts on the topic. And if you would like to follow my work, you can follow me on Twitter at Scott M. Greer and subscribe to my Substack, highly-respected.com, and also find my work on YouTube under Highly Respected.
Well, good stuff, dude. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We got the camera back on, so
all right, good
looks
deal.
like it's all worked out. But yeah, dude, thank you so much. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, that was Scott Greer, man. He's fantastic. He's just got the sauce, I'd say. He's got the sauce. Yeah, let's see. Okay, we got 3 minutes left. That was quite a bit. I can maybe cut him off like 2 minutes early. I want more Scott. We love Scott. He's fantastic. But yeah, I don't know what was going on. I think it got too hot in this room. It kind of cut the camera out. I'm not entirely sure what happened there. That was pretty freaking wild. Yeah, no, I agree with Scott. I think it's obvious to me that New York is the imperial capital of our American empire, and it's like, okay, sure, you can kind of try socialism if you want in Chicago, and it really won't have any effect for the most part nationwide. No offense to Tim and others that are native Chicagoans, but New York City does have a bit of weight to it, does have a bit of pull, and you don't want to see that. You don't want to see the seat of your empire fall into the hands of this woke race communist kind of character. So I'm glad Scott was able to come on. He had a great piece, actually. Let's see, Darth, Chastelina said Tate is messing up Tim's rig now. No, I don't know what happened. That wasn't my fault. I do lower his chair and raise it, and he gets like upset with that sometimes. That's all though. That he's chill. What else? It's Zealous Dog says, "You Tate, you're too hot. Dial it back, stud." Woo! Thank you, sir. Back at you. You can just tell that you're swagged out. What else do we got? Someone saying something about Jews. Someone said, "F are you talking about?" My bad, dude. Sorry. I'm just trying my best. What else do we got? Hey, what else? Everyone chirping. Was there any super chats? The great replacement of Americans in New York. That's true. Like, that's the primary thing going on here. I can't say that. You'd all be far more disappointed with Kamala. So true. I know all these people that are like ankle biting with Trump. It's like, do you realize how close we were to mass amnesty for illegals? Terrible. What else do we see? Hi, Tate from Estozer. Hello. Shay Stevens says Tate Brown puts the seat down. It's true. It's very true. What else we got? Real Noah Farbo says Tate's gay. It's not true. It's cap. I don't think it's true. I gotta buy the Don't Be Gay board to prove it to everybody. Only at shop.bonewshq.com. Fight Surge X says, Tate, what kind of dog do you have? You guys are gonna hate this. I have a golden doodle. I know. But what are you gonna do? I'm white. Anyway. Thank you very much for hanging out, guys. I hope the little back and forth at the end, that was kind of fun. Maybe we do that a little more. Thank you very, very much for watching. We'll be back tonight for Timcast IRL at 8 p.m. It's going to be a great show. I've been your host, Tate Brown, here on Thursdays, here on Rumble. You can follow me on X and Instagram at Real Tate Brown. Come on, come hang out, come follow. And I announced on IRL Tuesday, and I want to announce it again here. This weekend on the Culture War channel, we have very exciting content. Me and a good friend of mine, Connor Tomlinson, he's a friend of the show. You guys all know him. You know I'll love him. We are launching a new series. So on Saturdays, it'll be an hour of hard-hitting news, half British, half American. And on Sundays, we will have an exclusive interview and we will discuss a topic with a very illustrious guest. So on X, shoot me who you'd like to see pop up on a Sunday interview, who you want me and Connor to chat with. That'd be great. That'd be really helpful, actually, and let me know. So anyway, with that, we'll see you tonight. We're rating Dvory Darkins. He is awesome. You guys will love that. Go hang out with him, and I will see you guys on Friday. I'll be on IRL Friday, so I'll see you guys then. We'll see you all later. Thank you.